Hi, my name is Rubidium. Today we are looking at high key lighting, what it is, how to achieve it, and why you would want to use it. Now, I'm a big fan of genre filmmaking and neon noir, where one side of the actor's face is totally lit and the other one falls off into absolute darkness. That is high ratio, extreme camera lighting, but I understand that it's not for every project and it's not for every type of video. High key is a style of lighting where one side of the actor's face is almost the same, not quite, but almost the same, within about a stop or two of the other side of the actor's face, so that the talent really stands out from the background. They really pop, they really exist in this beautiful world where everything looks amazing. This is the kind of lighting you'll see in comedies like The Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, like Wedding Crashers, like Bridesmaids. Any lighthearted, funny tale of beautiful people doing interesting things, where we're existing in this world where everything's just as bright as it needs to be. I would personally define high key lighting as any time where your ratios are within a stop or a stop and a half at most. That means that the light side of the person's face is twice as bright as the dark side of the person's face. If they're even, and we'll show this a little bit later, if the two sides of the face are equally lit, you don't get any dimension, you get a very flat image, and it looks a little bit odd. So keeping it within half a stop to one stop is usually where high key lighting for comedy sort of sits. To give you a concrete example of this, I set out to light myself in a house with this exact lighting style. Here in the first pass, you see the available light. You know, this was a pretty well lit room, or two rooms, with light coming from both sides. It's not particularly high key, even though I'm right next to a window and there's a window behind me. To get that light coming in the window, what I did was put a quarter grid silk over the window. I used gaffer's tape. Then I put a Lupa Super Panel 60, which is around as bright as a Sky Panel S60, outside the window pushing in. That still didn't give me the level that I wanted, so I added a second light. This is a generator to really pump up the level. This gave me a nice, smooth, even light on the high side of my face, meaning the side that was going to be the brightest side. I then added a Fresnel, a Lupo 650 LED, on a stand behind me out of shot, so that it would give me that nice edge light, that halo behind me, which is so typical of these type of films. Because I now have much more light coming in the window than I have ambient light in the room, that meant that the dark side of my face fell off into maybe around 2 stops below key. What I did then was bring in a Lightmac 2L, which is a long Kino style light. I tried it above camera, behind the camera, but it didn't have enough output to compete with all the light coming in the window. So I then moved it in front of camera, but right above. Now this is something that I think a lot of people get wrong about high key lighting. What they do is place the fill light off to the opposite side, on the fill side of the subject, which is natural. The problem with this is it flattens everything out. By placing the fill light behind camera, you don't get a second set of competing shadows. It fills in the shadows that are created from the key light. Now this gave us what I thought was a really good image, but the room behind me was too dark and the background was too dark. So on the glass windows of the door, I added another quarter grid silk, this time with painter's tape because I didn't want to pull off the paint. And I added a Aperture 300D Mark II, filled in the ambient of the room and stopped the background being too dark. It's important to remember that high key lighting isn't just the ratio between the key and fill side of the subject's face. It's also the ratio between the subject and the background. You can't have a really brightly lit subject in a really dark background, or your image is going to look incredibly lit, meaning it's going to look like it was lit by film lights and not by the natural ambience of the scene. The added advantage of this Aperture 300D Mark II coming through the door is it lit me as I walked from the couch to the table. Another big hurdle of high key lighting is that only the places where the actors sit or stand are lit, and so they'll walk through areas of darkness to get between those places. Ideally, you want to get as much light as you can in there at the right ratio, so that the actors, as they move through the scene, are lit as well as when they're sitting where you want them to sit on their mark. You may also notice that there is a lot of color in this scene. The flowers on the table, the blue rug, the paintings in the background. That's another necessary element of high key lighting, is that there is enough color and life in the scene to really sell the tone you're going for. If this whole scene was black and white, it wouldn't work nearly as well. That is our look at the elements of high key lighting and how to achieve them. To run down the basics, it is a stop or less between your fill side and your key side, and a stop and a half or less between your subject and its background. The best way to do this is by fill behind camera rather than the opposite side. You can see here when we filled from the opposite side, you get a very flat image that doesn't really have any dimension to it. I hope this was helpful for people out there. I encourage you to experiment for yourself. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you next time.